Warning: viewer discretion is advised. Some of these stories might be violent or graphic in nature. Proceed at your own risk. I was born on the night of a waning gibbous, but my mom didn't say how happy she was to see me. I didn't know why until my uncle had walked in and took me from the doctor. At 2 minutes old, I could see in full color and clarity. I saw my mom had died during labor because of me. The doctor cut my cord and gave me to my uncle, then left the room. My dad entered the room then, taking me from my uncle and handing me to his friend, whom I later knew as Masky, one of my dad's proxies. Fast forwarding to a year later, I already knew how to walk at 6 months and could talk at 1 year old. I was already learning how to use knives and to read. Reading was my absolute favorite thing above all else. Whenever my dad was around, I noticed I didn't look like him at all. My skin wasn't pale like his. I didn't have tentacles or any of that. I looked human. But since I was still so young, I didn't worry too much about it. Masky, Hoodie, Jeff, and Jane all watched me and babysat me, even though I still lived with this human family who, I didn't know at the time, was abusive both sexually and other ways. Over the next couple years, I grew and learned whatever the proxies taught me. Masky stayed with me until I was 8 years old, then left me to myself. Whenever they weren't around, the humans would take me to my bedroom and would start to beat me and sexually abuse me to the point I couldn't move or make a sound. They had conditioned me to be silent and a good girl, as well as obey anyone I'm with, regardless of what they tell me. It made me violent towards everyone I was around. I was a rather physically violent child, I'd say. I'd get suspended almost every month and sent to detention every week for punching another kid in the mouth or stealing. The only thing I was seemingly good at was getting into trouble and hurting people or being a toy. No one wanted to be friends, so I'd find things and put them together using my needles and thread I had, creating a new toy. Every time I would find some animal, I would get so overly excited, even if it looks stupid. Do you want to be friends forever? Was the question I always asked before I would take the animal home or try to play with it. Animals never seemed to hurt me, except for chickens. They were little feathery ales of destruction. I didn't like chickens at all. My stuttering got in the way of a lot of things, such as trying to talk to anyone. 2 girls would play with me, but they weren't my friends. They'd always hit me and try to choke me and break my bones. I had this pet that would appear at a random time. I named him Blinky, like the ghost Blinky from Pac-Man, because he was in and out. Every time, he would chase the girls off and carry me back home, despite my protests. As I grew older, I would start to question why things happened and people acted like they did. I eventually asked my dad why I looked the way I did and he looked the way he did. Your mother was human, so you received a human form, my dear. But rest assured, you are full slender, as I and your uncles are, he explained to me while we were sitting on a fallen tree in the woods one wintry day. But why can't I be like you? I'm nothing like you, I said, sighing. I'm not a killer. I can't stand to hurt anybody anymore, no matter how cruel they've been to me. I still can't make any friends because everyone knows I'm not like them. How am I even remotely your daughter? He shook his head in a slow start to reply. You have the power to choose whatever you want to become. I didn't have a choice. You can either be a killer or a savior. It's all your choice, dear. Do what you like with your destiny. No one is able to change it but you. Until you decide what you want, we are not allowed to interfere directly in your life. If you choose savior, I will still help you, but I will not be able to directly. If you choose killer, we will be allowed to interfere directly as we see it is needed. So for now, think on it, alright? Nodding in reply to his answer, we both stood up and hugged as he left me alone, once again, in the middle of the forest covered in snow. Sighing as I walked back to my house, I remembered that my birthday was coming up in less than a year, and I needed to start planning. I was turning 18 next year, and I was getting horribly strong urges to commit very violent crimes, no matter how I released the urges into other objects. As I took off my jacket and walked inside, I looked down at my scars on my arms, frowning at the memory of the self-harm, even though I had blacked out when I did it. Where have you been, bitch? Came a raspy, drunk voice from the living room the minute I put my jacket on my bed. I was taking a walk. I'm not 5 anymore. Leave me alone, I replied back in a slightly annoyed tone, clenching my fists and building anger. You're late for your beating, lady. Now get your slutty ass over here, hiccuped the voice. We've been waiting all day. It's been 2 hours, muttering under my breath as I walk in the room, prepared to take my beating. I start to relax as they come near me and unzip their pants, chugging down bottles of beer. I wince at the first blow to my back that knocks me down. I lay still for as long as I can as they start to do the usual. All of a sudden, my anger rises up. I suddenly knock one of the guys off of me. I thought that moving away would make it go away. Oh, but how wrong I was. She started out as innocent as could be. Just a girl. Just a lonely, sad girl. We met through Facebook. She wanted friends, so I offered to be her friend. We would sit online for hours and talk, just getting out whatever might be going on in our lives. It was weird, though. The things she would ask, like what I was wearing or what things were in my backyard. I, thinking it was harmless, indulged her and answered truthfully, like that I'd be wearing black jeans and a Hollywood Undead t-shirt, or that my dogs and my dad's broken apart old white and red airplane were back there. I wondered what all this had to do with our friendship, but I was soon to find out. A few months after meeting this strange girl, I started to get the strange feelings, paranoia, constantly looking over my shoulder when I was working on drawings or walking down the street I lived on. I would look at the woods behind my property and would think I saw something out there. I thought I was just being paranoid after listening to creepypasta stories to lull me to sleep. I soon pushed the feelings out of my mind. A short time later, I happened to meet a guy at work. I spent most of my time with him. All my weekends were spent at his place, away from any internet. I would come home to my messages blown up. Hey, are you there? Hello? Hello? Where are you? And things of that sort. I promptly replied, apologizing and explaining that I had met someone and had been spending time with him. She seemed to understand, but I wasn't entirely sure. Well, about a few days after the latest incident of that, she asked me to draw something. A character for her. A character called Reaper. About this time, the feelings of being watched had grown worse. And the girl had been acting strange lately, though I, of course, drew a character. A creepy girl with a white mask. The mask had pitch black eyes and a jagged mouth. The pupils of the mask were glowing red. I sent it to her when done. She loved it. A few months passed, and I started hearing things outside. Scratching at the glass. Tapping. A soft laugh every now and again. Well, after a few days of this, it got worse. I would find notes in my mailbox, one of which read, "Will you be my friend?" I thought it was weird, and just burned the letter. I would hear my dog, a pit bull, growl at my window in the night. Nightmares would plague my dreams. I moved in with my boyfriend. Not too long after. I put it out of my mind for the longest time, thinking that moving would change things. I lost touch with the girl, and I thought it was over. But a few weeks after settling in, it started again. The noises, I mean. Though, this time, they were inside. I woke one night, seeing something, or someone, in the corner of my room. Jumping, I switched on my lamp, and upon seeing no one there, thought that maybe it was me just seeing things as a product of an overactive imagination. I fell back asleep. When I awoke, written on my wall was the message, "You betrayed me. Now, I will make you my best friend. Forever." I'm writing this now as a warning. If I disappear, it was her that got me. Reaper. I've seen her in my corners at night, holding a knife in her hand. Reaper is coming for me. Jack continued pressing the button on the remote, idly watching the different channels pop up before changing it again. Nothing really came on during the weekend, surprisingly. Nothing but paid programming and other shows he didn't enjoy. Sighing, the college student rose from his sofa, making his way to the desk resting against the wall beside his bed. He was already done with most of it in class that day. Unlike his roommate, Jack could get his shit done fast enough to have the rest of the day to do whatever. He wasn't feeling like playing any video games. Didn't really want to drive out anywhere. Swiping his black hoodie from his chair, Jack slipped it on and grabbed his dorm keys, shoving them in his pocket after closing the door behind him. A nice walk around the campus should do the trick. Fresh air usually calmed him, if not helped him think. Lately he's been feeling different. He knew it wasn't his body or college itself. He didn't have a girlfriend to worry about. He just felt different without any explanation. It gave him a headache. He was thinking so hard. Jack rubbed his temples, pushing the door leading outside with his foot. A gust of wind swept across, slamming the door behind him. It was around 6 p.m. The sky was mixed with both orange and blue. The further the sky grew, the darker it got. Curfew, surprisingly, was 12 o'clock midnight. He never really questioned it vocally, but always wondered why it was so late. Usually, curfew was around 8 p.m. where he lived. "Hey, Jack!" The male looked up to see one of the girls in his class. She most likely left class, considering she still had her books on her shoulder. Jack half smiled and rose his hand to greet her. It was, what was her name? Jenny Smith. "Hey, Jenny, how was class?" Jenny smiled and nodded her head, adjusting the strap. "It's pretty late. What made you stay so long?" The girl's smile lost its brightness before reviving itself. "Oh, just a study session. We have finals coming up soon, you know. Best to stay on the ball." She giggled before tucking her hair behind her ear. "What are you doing out here anyways? It's gonna storm tonight." Jack shrugged his shoulders, eyeing up the sky, smelling the air for moisture. Yep, it would rain any second. Just came out for some fresh air is all. Got done with homework in class and stuff. Didn't feel like playing video games or watching TV, so I came out here. Jenny nodded her head every so often, showing him that she was listening, and smiled again. "Well, you got your air. I gotta go, though. I'll see you later." Before Jack could reply with a goodbye, the girl quickly dashed past him, following the sidewalk up around the side of the dorms. Jack rose his brow curiously, his mind zipping with questions, only to have them cut off by a drop of rain, then another, and another. "Shit," he muttered, running back to the door to get back inside, not wanting to get too soaked in the rain. Another slam of the door rose up behind him. Jack started shaking his fingers through his hair, sending water droplets everywhere, while wiping off his face and jacket. As he made his way back to the dorm, Jack began fishing through his pockets for his keys, whistling a random tune while he travels up the flights of stairs, listening to his tune echo out in all directions. It was kind of creepy now that I think about it. Where was everyone? It was too quiet for a Friday evening. There was usually people up and about. Maybe lots of students stayed behind for tutoring. Maybe some went home for the weekend. Maybe people are already in bed or in their dorms. Being very, very quiet Jack sighed as he began unlocking the door, shoving his keys back in his pocket after the door closed behind him. Yo, Greg, you here, man? Nothing. No response. Just the sound of rain hitting against the windows. Huh. Guess he's studying too. That's a first. Jack made his way over to his bed, slumping down to get ready for sleep. He pulled off his hoodie, kicked off his shoes, and rolled over to face the wall, not bothering with the covers. He just wanted sleep. Closing his eyes, Jack slowly began dozing off, the rain practically lulling him to sleep. Praise Chernobog, for his blood-stained hands will bring salvation to us all. He shall bring us closer to everlasting paradise. He is our Lord and Savior. Praise Chernobog. Praise Chernobog. Jack let out a gut-wrenching gasp for air, waking up in a cold sweat. His eyes darted from one corner to the other before rising up from his spot. He panted, feeling his hands tremble from the dream he had just had. He looked around his room, relieved that his roommate, Greg, was in his bed. Jack could tell he was fast asleep from the dreaded snoring that came out of him. He himself was surprised he could sleep through it. Slowly exhaling through his mouth, Jack rose from his bed and staggered to the mini fridge in the other side of the room. His mind was churning with questions. What kind of dream was that? He'd never experienced one so real. Grabbing a water bottle from the mini fridge, Jack began gulping down the bottle, not caring if he woke Greg. Letting out a cold sigh, Jack threw the now empty water bottle into the recycling bin, now making his way to the bathroom. He stopped in front of the mirror, hands gripping the sides of the sink as he eyed himself. He was pale, eyes borderlining bloodshot. Groaning, he let his head low, fighting the urge to vomit. Man, what the fuck? He muttered, running his hand across his forehead to wipe off more sweat. That's what I get for playing those survival horror games, he thought to himself, slightly smiling as he began brushing off the whole thing. Get it together, Jack. It was only a dream. Dreams don't come true. You've just played too much Silent House is all. No big deal. Just go back to sleep and get some decent rest. Easier said than done. That morning, Jack felt someone shake him awake. Dude, Jack, wake up, bro. You've got to see this. Jack let out a tired, irritated groan from over the covers, slowly pulling them down to see what Greg wanted. The blonde grinned and flashed a photo on his phone in Jack's face. Guess who got laid last night? It was a picture of some girl sitting on his lap, posing for the camera. She looks drunk. Jack muttered sleepily, his head slowly rubbing the sleepiness from his eyes. Greg blew air from his pursed lips, rolling his eyes as he closed the flip phone. You're just jealous. Bullshit! I'd rather have a life than get some chick pregnant at college. Touché, good sir. But fuck you. I use protection. Whatever. Jack began pulling the covers over his head, feeling the weight of his friend rise up off the bed. Good. He could get back to sleep. Dude, I had such a weird dream last night. Jack paused when his mind processed the words weird dream and was instantly awake. Really? Me too. What was it about? Greg shrugged his shoulders, his fingers flying across the numbers on his cell, forming a text to his girlfriend. I had a dream where my grandma blew up a balloon and started chasing me around with a fly swatter. Jack's fear and anxiety dropped. He turned his head to look at his roommate. What the hell, dude? Greg laughed after snapping his cell shut. I know, right? I fucking hate that hag. Won't surprise me if she completely dislikes me. I broke so much shit at her house when I was a kid. Jack rolled his eyes, pulling the covers over his head, wanting to get some more sleep. Greg looked over and rose his brow. You said you had a weird dream, right? You remember it? Jack laid there in silence, wanting him to just leave already. The blonde furrowed his brow and began nudging Jack's back with his foot. Come on, tell me, I know you're awake. I had a dream about some guy preaching or something. And you say my dream is weird? I never said your dream is weird, but it is. Anyways, go on. Greg pulled up his knees, resting his arms on top of them as he listened to Jack. Jack sighed and rose up from his warm salvation of sleep. There was some guy preaching about some guy named Chernobog, and that he'd lead everyone to paradise with his blood-stained hands. They were dressed in these weird-looking robes and had on these weird masks. Jack looked over at his friend, watching him give him a weirded-out look. Bro, you've played way too much Silent House. Jack smiled a little and shrugged his shoulders, relieved that his friend had said his thoughts from the night before. What can I say? I love horror games. Jack spent most of the morning studying for finals, wanting to get school-related things out of the way before he enjoyed his weekend. Greg left to meet up with his girlfriend, telling Jack he'd be back around 6. It was usually on Sundays that the two sat down together and played one of the many video games they had until it was time for bed. Sighing, he turned the last page over in his notebook, memorizing his handwriting slowly. Suddenly, a knock at the door tore him from his studying. Jack turned his head and eyes to the door, then rose up from his desk to answer it. Pulling it open, Jack was surprised to see Jenny standing in front of the door. Oh, hi, Jenny. Jack smiled and waved. Hi, Jack. What are you doing inside on a Saturday? Jack looked back to his desk before returning to the girl. I'm getting my studying done early so I can enjoy the rest of the day with relaxation. Jenny nodded her head understandingly and placed her hands on her hips. Well, I'm sure you've done enough studying. You could come outside. Everyone's doing something today. Jack mentally sighed in relief. Good, so people were here today. I'll come out when I'm done, I guess. Jenny giggled and nodded again. Okay, see you later. And just like that, the student was off in a flash. Jack smiled a little before closing the door, making his way back to the desk. He sat down and began reading the page of notes, keeping everything fresh in his mind. Then it hit him. How did Jenny know where his dorm room was? They never really talked to each other, let alone shared dorm room numbers. It kind of gave him a creepy feeling at first. But then his real side thought otherwise. Maybe she saw you come into this room once without you noticing. Maybe Greg had told her what room he lived in, and it just so happened that Greg and he shared rooms. Shaking his head in frustration, Jack rubbed his temples. You're just overanalyzing everything, Jack. No need to fret over pointless stuff, he said to himself, running his fingers through his hair. Maybe he was done studying for the day. Again, he swiped up his hoodie off the chair and slipped it on, along with his shoes before heading outside. When he got to the bottom of the stairs, he felt himself breathe another sigh of relief when he saw how many students were up and about. Glad he wasn't going completely crazy. He watched as some people played ball, tossing either a football or a baseball. Girls were huddled in groups outside, talking about Lord knows what. Not that he cared. He was just happy to see people. Just then, a hand crept over his shoulder. Jack looked back to see it was none other than Jenny. Again. Oh, hey, Jenny. The girl smiled. You're outside of the dark room. Took my advice and came out, eh? Jack smiled nervously, giving a nod or two. You should hang out with me and my friends. We're going for a walk in the woods. Jack rose a questioning brow. For what? Jenny laughed. We're hanging out at our place. Come on, don't be a wuss. Jack felt a little hesitant at first, but he slowly came around, agreeing to follow. Jenny grabbed him by the hand and began tugging him along, making sure he was close. Hooray! Off to the cave! The cave? Jack asked, watching the forest grow bigger with every step. Our hangout, silly. Sarah found it at the beginning of the year, so we decided to make it a hangout area for us. Us? Jack asked again, looking back over his shoulder, watching the school slowly get consumed by trees. Me, Sarah, Bobby, Fred, and Luna. You ask a lot of questions. Jack couldn't help but let out a nervous laugh. Sorry, didn't mean to. I've been having a rough weekend is all. Jenny looked back to him and smiled. It's okay, we all have our days. As minutes passed, the two walked around what seemed like an invisible path that only Jenny could see. Jack couldn't help but begin to worry. He was about to open his mouth to ask another question until the girl released her hand, punching her fist in the air. We're here! She sang, running ahead of Jack. He looked up to see a rather large cave next to a babbling brook. He watched as two girls and boys appeared from inside of it, greeting Jenny happily, until they saw Jack. Their smiles faded, and they began leaning into Jenny, whispering while keeping their eye on him. Jack felt a little nervous, feeling as if he shouldn't be there at all, and that he should be back in his dorm, playing Silent House. But Jenny looked back as well, gesturing for him to come forward as if it was okay. Jack took a deep breath before making his way over, eyeing everyone but Jenny. All of them still didn't look pleased, despite their forced smiles. Hey? Jack rose his hand, giving them a small wave. Sarah eyed him over before crossing her arms. Hi, she said bluntly. Hey, said Bobby and Looney. Sup? Fred smiled, shoving his hands in his pockets. What's he doing here, Jen? I thought it was just gonna be you. Jenny rolled her eyes at Sarah's statement and wrapped an arm around Jack, using her free hand to pat him on the chest. I thought it would be cool if you guys met Jack. He's a really cool guy. Honest! Fred walked over to Jack and began leading him inside the cave, rambling on about what kind of video games he liked. Leaving the group outside, Sarah shot daggers across at Jenny. Jenny just gave a stink eye back. What the hell do you think you're doing, Jen? You can't just let outsiders into... He's not gonna find out anything. Just be nice for a change, Sarah. Sarah glared, then grumbled under her breath, following after Fred. Luna and Bobby looked at one another before going in as well. The group settled inside. Everyone huddled around a fire in a circle. Jack sat in between Jenny and Fred while others completed their small circle. Jack felt uncomfortable, especially with Sarah giving him dirty looks every so often. But surprisingly, the evening wasn't all bad. Everyone got to know him a bit more, asking questions and talking about what they enjoyed doing, talking about school and exams. Jack looked around the cave as they spoke. It was cool inside. They had tables and desks, places to set up books. They had a compartment for food. It really was like a place to hang out. I guess I was worried about nothing, Jack thought, smiling at the comment Fred made. There was a sudden clap of thunder from the distance, causing the group to look at the entrance of the cave. Another storm? Sarah complained, raising up with a book bag over her shoulder. I'm leaving. Last thing I want to do is get caught in this storm. Bye. Sarah turned heel and ran over to her bike resting up against a tree, and rode off back to the school. Luna and Bobby rose up together. We don't want to get wet either. We'll catch up with you guys later, okay? Luna stood smiling over at Jack and the others. The duo both pulled their bags off to the ground, running off to try to beat the storm. Fred didn't move. I'm going to stay here for a bit. There's some things I need to get back here. You guys can go on ahead if you want. Jack looked to Jenny before getting off to his stool. Yeah, I'm going to get back too. Greg is probably back and wondering where I am. Jenny smiled at him and nodded. Okay, I'm going to help Fred. Just follow the same path back to the school. I'll see you later, Jack. Jack smiled and waved goodbye to the two. He had to make his way out of the cave and into the forest. It shouldn't be too hard to get back if he followed Luna and Bobby from afar. An hour passed. Jack began unlocking his dorm with his keys, opening up the door to find Greg on his laptop on the sofa. Greg looked up and smiled. Yo, Jack, where you been? He asked, surprised that Jack had stepped out altogether. I was invited to come to some secret base in the forest behind the school, he replied, closing the door behind him, while he began kicking off his shoes. Greg rose a brow, closing his laptop. Oh, really? Who invited you? That Jenny girl, out first period class? Greg's smile slowly faded. Dude, she's weird. Jack furrowed his brow in confusion. What do you mean she's weird? Weird like how? Greg looked away nervously before answering. You know what kind of shit she reads? She has like books upon books about these freaky ass cults. I shit you not. Jack rolled his eyes before walking over to his dresser. Dude, I'm serious. You probably shouldn't hang out with her. People who read that stuff are messed up in the head. Yeah, whatever, Jack replied, rummaging through his clothes. I'm gonna take a shower. We have another storm coming. Greg blinked and looked back at the window. Oh man, really? I was gonna go out with Gabby tonight. He moaned sadly, watching the clouds turn into a deep gray. Jack chuckled at his friend before going back to the shower. Jack, wake up! Wake up, Jack! Jack felt Greg shake him, groaning in anger. What? What is it? Jack asked, looking up to a nervous Greg. Greg looked over to the window. Dude, someone's out in the forest lighting fires. Jack rubbed his eyes. So what? Someone is outside lighting fires. Look! Greg pulled him out of his bed and pointed across towards the forest. Jack sighed, still rubbing his eyes, before looking out the window. To his surprise, there was a fire lit, but it was far back in the woods, almost around the area where Ginny's secret base was. Well, be damned. There is a fire, he muttered, noticing the storm had stopped. What time is it? 2 a.m.? We should go check it out. That looks like it's where their hideout is. Greg gave him a look of, you're out of your fucking mind. What? I'm sure there's a perfectly good explanation why someone's out there lighting fires. Yeah, for cults! Jack shot him a look. Dude, get over yourself. There is no cult. I call bullshit. I'm not going. Jack smirked. You chicken? He asked, watching Greg get flustered. Dude, seriously, don't go. Last thing you want is to get into trouble. Jack just rolled his eyes. Whatever. I'm gonna check it out. If there's anything wrong, I'll report it to the headmaster. Jack changed out of his pajamas, dressed in jeans, a blue shirt, and his black hoodie and shoes. Pulling out their emergency flashlights from the desk drawer, Jack walked over to the door. I'll see you in a bit, he called out, watching Greg shaking his head. Curiosity killed the cat, man! Killed it! He called back, watching the door close. Jack pulled his hoodie up over his head and began making his way down the stairs. It was probably just Jenny and her friend hanging out in their spot late at night. I mean, loads of people do that, right? The second he walked outside, Jack felt the air shift from normal to damp and chilly. He began making his way towards the forest, using the flashlight as much as he could to follow the path Jenny had led him down the previous day. Jack started growing nervous, listening to the sounds of life of the night in the forest. Easy now, Jack. There's absolutely nothing that can hurt you in this forest. Nothing. Minutes passed as Jack finally began getting closer to the cave Jenny showed him before. He could see the dim light from afar and talking, loud talking, but it didn't sound like Jenny or Bobby or anyone else from the group. The closer he got, the clearer the voice. Turning off his flashlight, Jack peeked around a tree. What he saw shook him to the core. There, standing just outside the cave, was a group of robed people. Judging from their height, they were students, both male and female. They all wore black robes and blue, mouthless masks with big eyeless holes. One of them began stepping up to a podium. He rose his hand in the air. Thank you, my brothers and sisters, for joining me in this night of nights. Tonight is the night we summon our Lord and Savior, Chernabog. The group below him cried and called out things like, Praise Chernabog! And all hail Chernabog! Tonight is the night when Chernabog will choose his sacrifice, the one who will lead us to paradise and free us from this hell. The group began cheering and chanting the name, Chernabog! Jack shook his head in disbelief, slowly backing up from the tree he'd hidden behind. Oh my god, there really is a cult, he muttered. Jack turned to ran back to the school, only to be stopped by Jenny, who was standing there the whole time. Jenny, thank God you're here. Jack ran over to her. There's this cult thing. We have to tell somebody. Jenny smiled. Cult? There is no cult, Jack. You're just overreacting. She chuckled, suddenly feeling Jack shake her by the arms. No, listen to me! We need to get out of... His words were cut off by a rock against his head. His eyes fluttered slightly, stumbling back before collapsing on the ground with a thud. Blurry figures began circling around him as he watched Jenny smile down at him. Then, everything went black. Jack woke from a bucket of cold water being dumped over his head, blood trickling down the side of his head from his ear and the side of his face. He winced, feeling his head throb in pain. The second he remembered the last thing he'd seen, he gasped, looking up to see he was sitting in front of everyone. His arms were held firmly behind his back. The leader of the cult walked up to him and smiled under the mask. Chernabog has found his sacrifice. Hail Chernabog! He called, listening as the group repeated the praise. Jack attempted to struggle, the pain of his head fighting against him. You shall become one of Chernabog's sons, the chosen one to live upon this wretched world and do his bidding. The group cried the praise once more. Jack shook his head as fast as he could. No! All of you are crazy! Let me go! He yelled, letting out a yelp of pain from his arms being twisted. The leader laughed, turning to the group behind him. Come, my brothers and sisters, help me change this non-believer into the son of Chernabog. The group chanted the praise, stepping closer to form a large circle around Jack. Praise Chernabog for his blood-stained hands,
bring salvation upon us all. He shall bring us closer to our everlasting paradise. He is our Lord and Savior. Praise Chernobog! Praise Chernobog! He cried once more. Jack listened as the group began chanting in a different language. He felt his heartbeat go faster, watching one of the group members walk before them with a tray of tools and other queer objects. This person pulled off their mask, revealing it to be Ginny. She smiled, taking a spoon from the tray. Isn't this great, Jack? The great Lord Chernobog has chosen you to be his son. Jack shook his head, tears flooding his eyes. I never knew you'd be the one. No, Ginny, no! Please don't do this. He begged, watching her stop in front of him. She giggled, placing her hand gently on his forehead. All hail, Lord Chernobog. The girl then stabbed the spoon into Jack's left eye, ignoring the cries of pain Jack let out. He squirmed and struggled against two who held him down, feeling his eye being gouged out of his socket. Hold still, Jack. You'll make me kill you, Ginny said with complete calmness as she began working on the other eye, watching blood spurt and trickle down his face. Still ignoring his cries and pleas, the leader stepped in, holding a bowl of black, hot ooze in his hands. Behold, the sight of Chernobog. He called, watching Ginny hold Jack's head still, and he began pouring the black tar-like liquid into Jack's sockets. Jack let out a blood-curdling scream of pain, feeling the substance overflow and trickle down his eyelids. Placing his hand on Jack's forehead, the leader began chanting some language as others, watching as Jack's body became limp and lifeless. He watched as gently held a book open to a passage of a different language. Rise, great Lord Chernobog, rise and take this vessel of sacrifice we give you. Give yourself to this vessel. Rise, great Lord Chernobog, rise, rise, rise. Panting heavily, Jack rose from the now dead body of Bobby, yanking off the mask he wore like the others. Standing up, he looked over the massacre he created. Every single person was dead. Masks torn off, throats slashed, guts cut open, eyes gouged out. His hood and pants were stained with blood. Scalpel in hand, Jack turned to the last living person. Ginny, borderlining death, watched as he stepped above her. His teeth had sharpened to a point, and his nails were sharp enough to kill. He wasn't human anymore. She smiled, leaking blood from her mouth as she spoke. Release me into everlasting paradise. Jack growled low, teeth showing. You don't deserve paradise. None of you do. He knelt down, swiping the mask from the ground. Burn in hell, all of you! Ginny watched as he pulled the mask on, the black substance trickling down onto his mask from his eyes. She grabbed a hold of his ankle weakly, begging for paradise, only to have Jack pull away from her before walking into the shadows. She cried, tears rolling down her face as she called to him until her final breath. This just in. A group of students have been slaughtered at West Point College. Autopsy showed everyone's kidneys had been removed for unknown reasons. Many believe this had to do with a cult. Student Jack Nichols has been reporting missing. More tonight at 9.